Hello, dear friends. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is news time again from this very good channel. Welcome back. How are you all doing? Hope you're good. I pray that God will be with you in your endeavors. Today we have another update for you, and I want you to, after listening to it, you drop your opinion and suggestions you have so that Biafra will be free. And that's just it. Okay, let's go there.
A Musa Asari boys commander was reportedly left stranded in the bush near Okigwe after his men fled, pleading for his life and highlighting a lack of weapons to continue fighting. Biafran Liberation Army, BLA, Defense Force and Resistance Force are said to be actively chasing out enemy forces, referred to as Musa boys, from Biafra land, especially towards Owerri. Biafran fighters are demanding better weaponry, claiming they are ready to fight if adequately equipped, but won't continue risking their lives without support. Commander Holy Ghost declared that the ideology of Biafra cannot be defeated, regardless of threats or military action from the Nigerian government or army. There's strong belief in prophecy among the fighters that Biafra will eventually be liberated, even if it means dying for the cause. They accuse certain factions and individuals, e.g. Dr. Ra and Go 247, of sabotage, claiming they are trying to destroy years of struggle and efforts. They reject the label of terrorism, insisting that self-determination is a constitutional right and rooted in justice for historical wrongs, including the detention of Nnamdi Kanu. Holy Ghost responds to critics who call him a social media commander, saying their fight is real, on ground, and not for show. The message reinforces their single-minded purpose, comparing themselves to a programmed ATM with only one function: Biafra liberation. They call for unity among all Biafran commanders, urging a collective front to confront enemies and continue the push for Biafran independence. Let me share with you the full story as it unfolded, bringing in every detail so that you feel present in the dense forest near Okigwe in Imo State, Nigeria, where recent events laid bare the realities of the struggle for Biafran independence and the human cost that comes with it. Early one morning, with the humidity already thick in the air, a commander of the Musa Asari boys faction found himself alone, stranded in a remote corner of the bush. He had been separated from his comrades after a fierce skirmish. Under the oppressive canopy of tall trees, he crawled forward on his knees, calling out, though his voice trembled, from the depths of his soul for help. "My name is Commander Holy Ghost," he gasped, his words catching on the creaking branches overhead and the distant cries of birds. "I am alone. The others have fled. I beg for my life." In that moment, he revealed more than desperation. He laid bare the truth of his situation. He confessed that they had no weapons left, that without arms their cause was at risk, and that he had families waiting for him back home. Every syllable carried the weight of a man caught between duty and the instinct to survive. As the sun climbed higher, piercing the foliage in uneven shafts of light, word of his plight traveled swiftly through the ranks of the Biafran Liberation Army, the Biafran Defense Force, and the Biafran Resistance Force. These three entities have come to represent the organized front of the Biafran movement, each with its own command structure, but united under the overarching goal of liberating the southeastern territories from what they perceive as long-standing political and economic marginalization by the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Across makeshift radio channels, leaders in base camps closer to Owerri, the capital of Imo State, heard his urgent plea. The message was clear. Without adequate weaponry, the men could not stand against the Nigerian army and their proxy groups. Yet, even in those hard seconds of transmission, a broader declaration was being made. If you arm us, we will fight. If you leave us defenseless, we will be forced to retreat and preserve what remains of our lives and our principles. At the same time, Commander Holy Ghost was not content to focus solely on his predicament. In a broadcast that was later shared widely on social media platforms, he issued a robust declaration of intent. He said that no force, however well equipped, could snuff out the Biafran ideology. He compared their conviction to that of a forest tree that, though battered by storms and the slash-and-burn tactics of its adversaries, continues to send up new shoots in defiance of destruction. He reminded his listeners that their forefathers had endured even greater trials during the Biafran War in the late 1960s, yet their memory and their will to self-determination endured. He invoked prophecy, saying that it had been foretold long ago that Biafra would stand again, and that those who doubted their cause would one day acknowledge it. Every word he spoke was meant to fortify the spirit of his fighters, to remind them that they were part of a legacy that surpassed any individual or any government decree. Within hours, the narrative of Commander Holy Ghost's isolation had been woven into a larger tapestry of accusations and grievances. He and his fellow fighters leveled serious allegations against certain individuals whom they believed were sabotaging their progress from within. Among those named were Dr. Ra, an online commentator who had once shown sympathy for the Biafran cause, but who, in their eyes, had shifted allegiances when political pressures mounted, and Go247, a social media influencer whose cryptic posts they suspected were intended to sow distrust among the ranks. These accusations were not thrown about lightly. For weeks, suspicions had simmered that pockets of disinformation were being spread deliberately to fracture the unity of the movement. Commander Holy Ghost argued that every act of sabotage, every rumor of betrayal, served the interests of those who wished to keep Biafra under the jurisdiction of Abuja, preventing full recognition of its autonomy. At the heart of all these discussions lay the figure of Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, whose detention by the federal government of Nigeria had galvanized many to the cause. For Commander Holy Ghost and his comrades, the incarceration of Nnamdi Kanu was not just a legal matter, it was symbolic of all the injustices they felt had been inflicted upon the Igbo people and other ethnic groups of the old eastern region. They pointed to his prolonged trial, his alleged mistreatment in custody, and the silence of global institutions as proof that the system was rigged against them. "We do not seek terror," Commander Holy Ghost emphasized in another broadcast. "We seek justice. Self-determination is enshrined even in your own constitution. Yet here we stand, labeled criminals for daring to dream of governance over our ancestral lands." And so the debate over classification, terrorist or freedom fighter, raged on. Some voices in Abuja insisted that any group employing armed resistance must be designated as terrorists under international law, thereby justifying harsh counterinsurgency operations. Commander Holy Ghost and other senior leaders countered that their struggle was no different from those historically justified by international charters, pointing to the United States Declaration of Independence and other precedents where breakaway entities invoked rights to self-governance. "If history is written by the victors," he said, "then let the record show that our memories and our claims are just. We will not be erased by labels or by bullets." The emotional core of these transmissions always returned to the fighters themselves. In remote clearings, groups of Biafran Defense Force volunteers gathered to listen. Many were young men in their late teens or early 20s, clutching rifles they had managed to secure through informal channels. Each man carried the name of a fallen comrade stitched into his uniform or scrawled on his water canteen. The youngest among them, barely 17, confessed in a shaky voice on a recording that he wanted only to ensure that his younger siblings would never again feel the sting of economic marginalization, that they might attend university without bribes, and that they might work under the rule of law rather than under the rule of fear. When they heard Commander Holy Ghost's plea for weapons, they raged at the Nigerian government's indifference. They demanded modern rifles, body armor, and medical kits, nothing more than what any legitimate security force would require to carry out its duties and to protect its personnel. The Nigerian army, for its part, accelerated patrols around the fringes of Biafran territory, claiming that the operations were aimed at restoring order and combating banditry. Official spokespeople in Abuja released statements describing the Biafran fighters as criminal elements and separatist agitators who threatened the unity of the country. At a press briefing in Abuja, the Chief of Army Staff warned that no amount of ideological fervor would save the fighters from the superior firepower and training of the regular army. Yet commentators familiar with counterinsurgency operations pointed out that heavy-handed responses often played into the hands of guerrilla factions, bolstering recruitment and undermining public confidence in government assurances of peace and security. Back in the bush near Okigwe, the stranded commander continued to broadcast, his voice hoarse but unbowed. He issued a challenge to the federal government of Nigeria. "If you are truly committed to peace, equip us to fight our battle on an even footing. If not, admit your failure to address deeper grievances and allow us to pursue a political solution." He invoked the memory of the 1967 to 1970 Biafran War, when hunger and disease had claimed millions of civilian lives, and contrasted that tragedy with the vitality of today's movement. He said that the world had evolved, that international humanitarian law now prohibited starvation as a weapon of war, and that any attempt to starve Biafran territories into submission would draw global condemnation. Things grew tense when reports surfaced that the fighters had intercepted Nigerian army communications, suggesting an imminent large-scale operation to clear out separatist strongholds around Owerri. Satellite images leaked online showed what appeared to be armored vehicles and logistic convoys moving toward Imo State. Rumors spread that camps sheltering displaced civilians sympathetic to the Biafran cause had been targeted for interrogation. In response, Biafran Resistance Force operatives released a video snippet showing soldiers rounding up villagers at gunpoint, then cutting to images of local youth digging makeshift trenches. The narration, in crisp English and Igbo, warned that any attack on civilian populations would be met with equal force, and that the lines between combatant and non-combatant zones could no longer be guaranteed in a heated conflict. Amid these hostilities, certain leaders on both sides called for dialogue. Non-governmental organizations and church leaders in Enugu State circulated petitions urging ceasefire talks and humanitarian access. They pointed out that recent clashes had driven thousands of families into makeshift camps without sanitation or medical supplies. A coalition of elders from various Igbo communities, including retired professors and clergy, drafted a letter to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu requesting a mediated settlement. They proposed a framework that would allow a referendum on increased regional autonomy, a compromise they believed could diffuse violence without compromising the unity of Nigeria. But neither Abuja nor the armed wings of the Biafran movement showed much appetite for immediate negotiations. The army insisted that separatism was a non-starter, and the Biafran Liberation Army leaders insisted that autonomy short of complete independence would only prolong their suffering. Throughout all of this, Commander Holy Ghost remained a central, polarizing figure. To some, he was a hero whose steely resolve offered hope to a people who had felt abandoned since colonial times. To others, he was a dangerous demagogue whose rhetoric risked plunging southeastern Nigeria into open conflict. Yet even critics acknowledged his skillful use of social media and radio transmissions to keep the narrative alive, to cultivate an image of invincibility, and to rally support. He spoke with conviction about a prophecy that, like those heralded in centuries past, would one day galvanize the faithful to claim victory. "When the day comes," he said, "and they see the banners of Biafra raised over the gates of Owerri and Enugu, they will know that no force on earth can stop an idea whose time has come. As the hours turned into days, the tension between anticipation and dread grew more acute. Reports arrived of the Musa Asari boys' earlier factions regrouping under new commanders elsewhere, and of fresh skirmishes breaking out in the forests near Umuahia. Families of fighters streamed into towns like Aba, seeking news, clutching photographs of their sons and husbands, their prayers blending with the sound of distant gunfire. The movement's demand for better weapons became not just a tactical plea, but a moral indictment of a government that had failed for decades to address the underlying political and economic inequalities in the region. In the heat of this moment, Commander Holy Ghost issued his final appeal to his fellow Biafrans. He called for unity among all the commanders, those in the Biafran Liberation Army, the Biafran Defense Force, the Biafran Resistance Force, and every smaller unit bearing the dream of independence. He asked them to lay aside personal rivalries and join in a single front, pooling resources, coordinating strategy, and presenting a united leadership. There is only one path forward, he said, and that is our shared struggle for Biafra. We must stand as one body with one heart, one mind, and one purpose. He reminded them that their cause was not hatred, but hope, not vengeance, but justice. He urged them to protect civilians and to avoid needless destruction of property, because our future state will be judged by how we treat our own people. He spoke of schools that would reopen under Biafran administration, hospitals staffed with local professionals, and farmland returned to communities from which it had been seized. He painted a vision of a society where every citizen, regardless of religion or gender, would have an equal stake in governance and development. His words resonated with many listeners because they transcended the immediate conflict. They reached into a collective longing for dignity and fair treatment. By the time the sun set on that fateful second day, the contours of the struggle were clearer than ever. The Federal Republic of Nigeria had to decide whether to provide the relief and reforms needed to undermine the appeal of armed resistance, or to double down on military solutions that risked alienating entire communities. The Biafran commanders had to decide whether to seize the moment for unity or to allow fragmentation to continue, thereby weakening their position. And the international community watched from afar, some with concern for regional stability, others with curiosity, wondering if this latest chapter in the quest for Biafran self-determination would end like the last, with tragedy and forced reintegration, or if history might finally give way to a peaceful resolution. In that bush near Okigwe, Commander Holy Ghost remained the image of a lone figure against a backdrop of uncertainty, begging not just for weapons, but for recognition of a cause that he and thousands of others believed was just and inevitable. His story, and the broader narrative of the Biafran Liberation Army, the Biafran Defense Force, and the Biafran Resistance Force, is a testament to the enduring power of ideas, to the potency of historical memory, and to the human capacity for hope even in the darkest of times. It is a story that will continue to unfold paragraph by paragraph as long as those who believe in Biafra are willing to stand by their convictions and demand to be heard. This is the end of our news update.